So I'm going to start this with this view of the Fraser River just upstream from Haney. I've talked about it before. This is my view, but rather than my old ugly mug, which I'll now come down here, take my glasses off and continue. I go by the unprofessor because I don't have a degree, but I should be teaching. So I've decided to teach here in about 20 different fields all at once, something like that. But let's not go on about that. I was watching more on this thing with the electric cosmos, plasma cosmology, and it's like I said, it was interesting because cosmology was the field I was always most interested in, and also things like when I was a kid, I wanted to be an inventor and invent things, but I had no idea what. Now when I see all this new electrical theory, it all makes perfect sense to me in terms of all stuff I already know about, and then they get into things about the ancient world that are like really compelling. Like today, I was watching a technical video on a guy doing experiments producing plasma between manipulating magnetic fields and producing plasma in a vacuum. It's a very interesting video. I'll link it in the comments, yes, in the comments too. Anyways, everything, comets, volcanoes, everything. There's more going on between planets than that. There's big plasma discharges too, which is scary shit. But it is what it is, and we are only a blip in time. And we're lucky we've survived all the things that have happened before. I have all the various issues as to not only why did the ice melt so rapidly, but why did it form so rapidly? Was it volcanoes or what? How could it just be magnetics and statics and shit like this? And I don't talk like an academic. I talk like a longshoreman. So I'm the unprofessor. They never could put me in any kind of department. So I'm a generalist lecturer on everything I know. Classics, geophysics, astrophysics, classical history, proto-ancient history, certain things about geology. I don't know any field in detail, but comprehensively they make all one whole thing to me. Anyway, so what I'm seeing in this stuff is when they showed me, this guy was showing the shape of, he was looking for a certain kind of shape that he was looking for, he'd seen in space, right? And it's kind of like a dome with a circle on the top of it, right? The perfect shape to produce the kind of field he wanted, right? And it's the dome of CERN in Geneva he found, right? He went, oh, look at that, right? Yeah, and sure enough, exactly that shape. He made the cast of it, and you could do that. But the guys who came up with that dome didn't think about that. They were just going after the classical dome, which comes from the pantheon of the Roman gods. It means all the gods. It means pantheon. And it's just the dome of heaven. It's like a grid reaching into the sky with a hole in the top. It symbolizes the electric cosmos, right? Basically, I'm just trying to sum it up in that form. And it's very Western. He goes on through, and he shows the church in Malta. Another one he likes too, St. Paul's, right? And the angels in the painting are right where they would be. That's because the Hermetics, who are behind all the paintings of these things he's doing, look at the raffle of the pre-romantic painters, and also the romantic painters, until the painters and the intellectual community until the Great War had all the classical education of Europe had come back since the Renaissance had been brought back because of the conquest of Byzantium. The fall of the Ottoman Empire and the looting of it in 1204 by the Venetians and the French, including the body of Alexander from Alexandria. Yeah, that's a big one, but the Vatican, we can never go there. And the San Marco, you can never do DNA tests on that guy to determine if he's Macedonian or not, but I kind of know he is. But this stuff in history, you can't deal with the great powers, you can't deal with academia, you can't fight them. All you can do is keep on exploring the truth. So I don't want to be a whiner like a lot of the videos I find about, academia, they spend all this time whining about what academia hasn't covered and the conspiracies about. No, it's just obstinate ignorance and stolidity. Yes, there is a Masonic secrecy thing for sure. And I was watching a really, really interesting thing. There was a reading of the rules of the Masons from a guy who'd left and why and what's in there. Well, I know a lot more about the Neoplatonics than even the Masons do, unless maybe they're very high order Masons, in which case I'm a freelance rogue, but we're not a Mason. Good help, God, no. I just have acquired the knowledge I have on my own and my analytical and synthetic ability to synthesize information and understand it and remember all kinds of things, and they fit into place. I read Lobsang Rampa. I know he's young. you know, but he did have this memory technique where you had like an endless series of drawers. And I don't think in those terms, but a certain topic will occur to me. I'll hear something about something else. So anyways, he went on for the Pantheon. He showed these domes of the things, and then he's gone on about, you know, working with these models of design. And, you know, we have these issues in the ancient world. Like, how do they see inside the Temple of Hathor and inside of the great painted tombs of the pharaohs? How do they see to paint without leaving any soot? Electricity. But how do they manifest the electricity? I don't know. You know, Scooby-Doo. You know, there's all kinds of curious questions posed by this. But the electric theory for me as a geologist, amateur geologist, geographer, certainly geographer, I know the landscape where I'm from and is familiar with, roughly familiar with the Idaho lava beds and Yellowstone and the Cascade volcanoes and the Columbia Plateau basalts, and also the formation of the compressed exotic terrains. They're called exotic terrains of British Columbia. And I have questions as to how was it that the Rockies block faulted like they did? Was it the pressure of the ice, or when did it happen exactly? Can they date the date of those cliffs when they happened? Because cataclysm theory is getting more and more convincing. And I come from country around Lillooet. The Bridge River Lillooet country is definitely built by cataclysm. And some kind of interplay of ice and fire, and maybe the cosmic fire. Because when you look at that map from the area, above ground area, there are two faults intersecting just southeast of Lillooet at Foster Bar, which is where Fountain View Farms is, on Highway 12. And Fountain Valley goes up the one-way straight up the Fraser all the way to Quesnel or beyond. And the Yalakum Fault splits off, goes up the near side of Fountain Ridge to Lillooet, like up the Fraser, and then up the lower Bridge River, up the Yalakum, and keeps on going. And Fountain Ridge is a little rock, little sliver of whatever crust it was. It's floating in between the two of them. It supposedly has glacial properties. And there is an ice cave that will form in the summer that is like a sauna in the winter. So it has unusual thermal properties in the rock, which is, you know, nobody's ever explained it. There's other things around there which I won't get into. It's some really fascinating caves. Questions of how did the Marble Range and Pavilion Lake form? Because they're on top of, as far as I understand it, they're on top of the Chilcotin basalts, and also Keatley Creek's age. It's an archaeological dig midway between Fountain and Pavilion, which is about 16 miles from Lillooet up Highway 99. Not on the highway. You have to get a permit to go in it. But it's a huge Quigley village, like an earth house village. Beautiful spot. Anyway, there's lots of papers written on it. But the slide that let go, it used to be Lakeshore. It's now high up on a sand bank on the benchland. It was a lake bottom that had been formed, and there was a Fraser was a lake, and there was a slide, they say, at Texas Creek, which I imagine maybe was the big slide, we call it, which is still a rotten part of mountain, but a whole bunch came down and dammed it up. But there's not just that terrace level of the benchland there. There's various terrace levels around there, so there's different areas of Glacial Lake all through the mid-Fraser Canyon. So at different times, the Fraser backed up at different locations, and I'm wondering whether they can be dated and located and studied and thought about, because to me it seems like Keatley Creek, knowing that I know that the Seton Lake landslide, the proto-Seton Lake landslide, which created Short Portage, 9,000 or 7,000 years ago. I have to check. I have to go look at it. 7,000, 9,000. 9,000, I think. So 7,000 BC. That's why I was thinking 7,000. 7,000 BC. Seton and Anderson Lake are now too. So the wave that would have come back out of that would have washed down the Fraser and taken out any whatever lake that was the Fraser. If it was dammed, it would have been dammed to the level. If it was dammed to the level of Keatley Creek, then in the Seton Valley it would have been a lake up to a certain much higher level than it is after the slide that broke those two lakes. Because when that slide came down into the proto-Seton Lake, it was actually the proto-Meta-Fraser Lake that had included Seton Canyon, unless somehow that was all blocked in Cayush Canyon. That was all blocked somehow. There's a huge gorge there. how that was cut, how rapidly it was cut. I can't see slow erosion or one single glacier doing that, right? That's like something got ripped. So when you look at the map from above, what you see is the Fraser does this, and Fountain Ridge is in the underside of the bottom part of the U. This is coming down from Pavilion, Fountain, around 6 Mile, and a little bit's down there. And I'm doing this in your direction backwards, but I'm looking up. In my direction, it's northwest I'm pointing. Sorry, I should be trying to do it for your orientation. That's the Bridge River. And then you go up the Bridge River to Moha, where the Yalakim River enters it. And the Bridge River Canyon begins. I'll post photos. Maybe I'll add some to this at the end. Or a second edition of this will include photos to this. And illustrate this. The gorge of the Bridge River Canyon is shattered rock, rotten rock. I've never seen such complicated geology of such intense mapping of any kind of geology in BC. Now, I don't know how to find again the map I once had, and I left things with the people in the Yalakim, the Bridge River people, and I never get, I trusted everybody, and I trusted too many people with things that I thought I'd keep. One time I thought I was going to leave them as an archive in the mountains for someone to find in the future of whatever civilization we survives us, but comes back after us. And not necessarily going to be a human one, because we are facing oblivion right now, and people have to wake up. Which is why I'm doing these vlogs, because I have other friends now that they are starting to vlog also, that we have to give our thoughts on the world and what's going on, including in Canada, including the things we have to change here. All of us have to change. And what we all have to change is to understand the technologies that are possible to transform this country. There's a whole new era of technology opening up. Why are we clinging to the old dig it up, send it up, ship it away, let somebody else own it philosophy? Why are we doing that? But can we take control of it? That's the thing. I tell all the young people, you have to take control of it. I can't do it, but you have to learn about what's possible. And now the electric theory of the universe has all kinds of technological implications. And everybody that I've talked to about it agrees with me that air transport in BC, individual air transport and small passenger air transport like they have in Norway, short haul aircraft would be low altitude electric aircraft, and we use the canyons. We don't have to go in aircraft lanes. We use the canyons, or just use the routes of the rivers, or there's passes between here and wherever. You don't have to follow the highways. You're weather dependent, but so are highways, and but it's much safer. And you still want to control access because the wilderness is being under population pressure. There's all kinds of issues we're facing. But the electric cosmos thing, I'm getting back to the Lillooet country now. The map of the Bridge River country, the canyon I just spoke about. Huge jade mine there, full of quartz. Big veins of quartz. Huge vein of quartz. Man, that's a big vein of quartz on a big overhang partway up the canyon. And you had jade mine high up. There's big jade boulders the size of houses all along the river. And there were bigger ones down farther. They rolled down the river in the old days. It was a huge river until they dammed it. Now it all goes through the mountain, Mission Mountain, and down to Seat Lake, and through a canal out to the Fraser, a bunch of powerhouses, and an upper powerhouse at LaJoy on the Bridge River. So the Bridge River has been killed. So the rock is changing there. But how that canyon formed is what I'm trying to get at. At some point, the Bridge River Glacier was pushed up against where the Shulaps Range meets the snub of the Bendor, which is Mission Ridge. What Mission Ridge is, to me, it looks like a Nunatak, really big time. And also on it is a circular formation called Mission Peak. And I also know about something else up there that the natives say was there before they were there, right? And it's some kind of wheel depression, and I never surveyed it. I don't know where. I've never seen it. You can only see it in the trees, but your horse will find it. And then all this, they go down and you come in the trenches, and you come down the middle, and you're in this clearing in the bottom, and it's circular. But nobody's ever surveyed it. I can't see it from the forestry photos, and I hope it hasn't been logged out. That whole ridge has been logged out. It disgusts me. Anyway, so, but up there's some really odd-looking formations that, like the limestone of the Marble Range, they're just kind of oddities, and I guess maybe there's this whole thing about limestone forming on top of the volcanics, was it? Or on top of the ice? No, on top of the volcanics. And then, so the Marble Range is curiosity. And then over the new cave over in the Wells Grave Lab area, there's all kinds of stuff about the interior. And you have to remember the Fraser Glacier also flew out through the Peace and through the Skeena. You know, that it didn't just flow it through the Columbia, because it originally flowed out the Okanagan, not down where it does now. But it did, a trickle of it came down there. But what it didn't get past Fraser. Between Hell's Gate and Riel, no glacier got there. If it did, it was really rapid and really violent. But the thing about the Bridge River Canyon is it's this perfect S pattern. It looks like a lightning bolt, as does the whole shape of the Bridge River dendritic tributary system. The North Fork is the Yalakum, the South Fork is the Hurley, and then there's Gun Creek, Lecky Creek, Totten Creek. There's a certain fibrillation of it. Yeah, all basins look dendritic. They all look like leaves, you know, because they're draining. It's a fluidic system, but fluids are always also about water, you know. Like the skies are a certain charge and the oceans are another, and rivers flow downhill for gravity too, right? But in terms of given all that ice and the magnetic intensity of the volcanic eruptions of, I don't know how many of the Bridge River cones went at once, and the Nichols Creek flows, it's a lava flow, and there's the Salal Creek volcano. I think they're all at the same time. I think it's not quite at the same time as Mount Meager. I don't know the dates on Cayley or Brute, which are near Whistler, or Garibaldi, although native stories along the coast all talk about volcanic eruptions, whether it's in Squamish or Kincombe or Antioch or anywhere up the coast, you know, and all I do at Alaska, it's link it. There's all kinds of volcano stories. We have to start looking at all those as actual factual accounts and trying to determine which dates they are. I mean, we can help, everybody can date, realize that native history really is real here. They've survived a lot here. They've survived volcanoes, they've survived floods, they've survived tsunamis, like we all have all the time. Our ancient history, parts of it that we can't find, that's because it's on the bottom of the Mediterranean, on the bottom of the Black Sea, on the bottom of the Arabian Ocean, and the Gulf of Cambrai, and whoever knows where else in the world. It's not that we can ever all find it all. But we can understand maybe the mysteries of the electrics and the old stories, you know, that there's stories about Zeus and his thunderbolt, and thunderbolt is knowledge and wisdom. And understand that the Punics, you know, were survivors. Punic civilization is essentially out of Haran and out of the Banlieue complex of there's several things I've said about Upper Chaldea. And all the videos I'm watching keep on talking about Sumer. These guys got to get up to date. Sumer, you know, they keep on going, well, I'll start with Sumer and the Anunnaki, they say, you know, but whatever. Yeah, but why are you guys talking to the Mahabharata? Why? Are you just ignorant? I mean, but is that not any more credible than, are you only talking the Anunnaki because it's related to the Bible and the Mahabharata isn't? You see, the bias in your view of mythography has to open. Anybody doing ancient science, let's call this ancient science. There's a whole field. How's that for ancient science? I got to coin terms because nobody else has come up with all this general field yet. This is a general field. And you need classical knowledge and abilities. You know, abilities, what is that? I don't know. The ability to digest memory. You know, and see things. You know, but you have to look at the larger scale and realize, you have to realize that the Mahabharata, the Voluspa, you know, the African stories, the people going on about the Incas built something 1,000 years ago. Here's news for you, kids. The Incas weren't around 1,000 years ago. Man, the amateur history videos would get me off. Get me off, but I don't mean in the good way. Sometimes you guys piss me off, right? But you got to wake up. You got to wake up and realize there's more than you don't know yet. You know, always know the more than you don't know. Socrates would have told you that. He told you Socrates' most famous statement in Greek. I wish I could still do it in Greek. The only thing I know is I don't know anything. Anything I'm telling you here is nothing I know. I'm just stuff I've been told or have read. I've been informed and decided is valid. Like the Colburn, for example, I'm sure is extremely valid. You know, it's interesting as Genesis, and man, do we want to find the rest of those copper plates. Whoa, for what else might be in there, from what the other titles of the lost books are. You know, but that's not the only lost book in the world. Glastonbury is not the only place where such things were. Who knows what was the Adiona, or at Lindisfarne, because not just monks were taken and sold, scrolls were taken too, and who knows what they had. And then Henry VIII, he burned a lot of things, and then World War II burned a lot of things. Napoleon, he destroyed a lot of things. The wars between the Orthodox and the Christians, they destroyed a lot of things. The Christians destroyed the Cathars, who had a lot of ancient knowledge. Alchemists, Jews, Kabbalists. So I'm a Hermetic. You know, I'd say I'm a Neoplatonist, I guess, except I don't ascribe to their version of reality. I wouldn't call myself agnostic. But I understand all that stuff. Sure. It's like anything else. But no, it's not like anything else. It's a special tradition. But it contains a lot of things that have often been dismissed as superstitious and spurious. But really, the actual fact of the matter is that astrology and alchemy are the basis of modern science. And the people who are writing the poetry and making the paintings 100, 200, 300, 400 years ago were all versed in classical myths and stuff that was eradicated either by the church or the Counter-Reformation or the Reformation or World War I or whatever else. Like the Popol Vuh, the famous Popol Vuh of the Maya is one of the only books of the Maya that survived. And the reason was that a Russian soldier had seen it in the bonfire that from the Deutsches Bibliothek, or whatever it was, the German library in Berlin, or the Deutsches Museum, right? It had this pile of books. He saw it had an interesting cover design. So he picked it up, the Popol Vuh, and that's why we have the Popol Vuh, right? And similarly, the Edda is only because Snorri decided to write some of it down. Now, there might be other writings found someday of some other scribe in Icelandic who, the thing is, all the documents that were ordered, sent by the King of Denmark, gathered, and when Iceland joined the Kingdom of Denmark, send me all your sagas and all your writings and all your poetry. It all went to the bottom of the Norwegian Sea in a storm. I don't know if it's gone, whether it could be that's recover what salt water does to that stuff, that deal with those depths. But more than what ships have sunk, it's what went under the waters in 6000 BC, as I've talked about before, when Lake Agassiz let go and Black Sea flooded and more, and Mediterranean came up more. And in 12,800, it had already come up 400 feet. And the videos keep it confused. It still came up more after that. And in 20,000, it came up also. So we know why the younger dry ice happened and things started to cool, because the impact or the ion bolt or whatever was the Greenland thing that created that object, or it fell from the sky. However it got there, according to the Velikovsky theory, it's a chunk of Mars that came by from Venus passing by, because of the plasmic theory of the universe works that way. Either that or how, but other than that causing the albedo to increase and the temperature suddenly drop and freeze all the mammoths and everything else that happened now, Missoula floods, all that stuff, great fires and devastations told of in all the mythologies, whatever the appropriate term is, because they use myths and people think that means falsities. No, they're great things, myths. They can sum up a lot of truth in them, and not just physical events, but physical events also are recorded in them because they're oral tradition. And the oral tradition is quite valid, and this is why the native legacy here, it's why I say about the volcano lore on the coast here should all be, please, my First Nations friends, start sharing your stories about the land, about what needs to be known, about what's happened here, and we had big volcanoes here, Mesa and Aziza and so on. But I think the Fraser's different levels, and that thing that happened when Seton Portage let go, or the slide that formed Seton Portage let go, maybe the dam that held back all of Cayush Canyon. That's why the Great Gorge of Nquumps there between Seton Lake and the Fraser, maybe that was gouged out by a wave. Oh, I think so now. And then there would have been, that's the thing about, there's a lake across there, there would have been a lake there because the airport's up on a bench, you see, and is that the same height as one up from Fraser? No, so there were other dams lower down the Fraser at different times after that one, but that would have swept down the Fraser. And yeah, that's a whole disaster there. I call that whole era the age of cataclysms. But in terms of understanding that landscape, when the volcanoes are going and the ice is still there, and the ice has a static charge and the atmosphere is static, and this is 2,000 years ago, well, that wasn't really contemporaneous with too much in the Mideast or anything, but over the years that area has been active. Silver Throne, Garibaldi, Cayley, all the planetary volcanics are connected, of course, right? The planet is just one thing. It's one electrical object with circuit patterns all over it. And it looks to me like the Bridge River's tight S-curve is a lightning bolt seared into the rock. Somehow it fractured the stress on the rock along some kind of pattern. There had never been an outlet from the Bridge River yet. Maybe there was a high one, but there was something fractured that caused that fracture to form in that formation that looks like an electrical pattern. Now, maybe I'm just talking off the top of my head and being influenced too many by videos. I grant that. But it's all very interesting and provocative. And as far as electrical theory of the cosmos and this thing about the when he showed me the Pantheon, and I went, oh, okay, that Roman cosmography knew a lot more than we knew, because so much of the pagan world was destroyed by the church. It's a great tragedy. Just as the Romans had destroyed knowledge of, the Punic world, what the Punics knew, because the libraries in Carthage, or the books of Carthage, must have included books from Tyre and Sidon of the ancient ages, and books like Berassus that told of ancient ages before our own. The Sumerian king list and the Egyptian king list, they go back 200,000 years. Okay. Yeah, but how far back do they really go? The thing is with these earlier ice ages is, we know what caused the Younger Dryas, but what caused that earlier melt before the Younger Dryas and before that? That's the hit at 20,000. So there is this other period of civilization that grew up suddenly when the ice melted, and there was some water. There would have been some water come up from the 20,000. How much ice, when all the ice was locked up? I want to find the water levels. Somebody can show me a bathymetric map. I'm going to go look for a bathymetric map on Google right now, see if I can find one. To look for things, I wonder if there's this and that in certain spots I'm thinking of. But I'll close with this thing I was watching when this guy that brought up the Pantheon and made this little model of it in the CERN dome, it actually has the statue of Nataraja out front. But it looks like a button mushroom with a thing on top. Looks like a lot of mushrooms with a thing on top, right? He lights it up and he does his thing. He fries this field for a while, and then when you look at it, it has these concentric rings, like when you're working with metal and you're steel and you got those stripes on the metal, you get these rings around it, right? And immediately I went, you know what that is? It's the Eye of the Sahara. That's what the Eye of the Sahara is. It's the same, those same formations, including the way it looks at the center. The bullseye crater that they found on Mars that they know are ion bolts. This is the whole thing about the electric universe. The electric universe explains things that the physicists and the geologists otherwise can't. So, I think geology needs a revisit. We have a field called geoelectrics. But interestingly, it intersects with classics in a really interesting way. And classics, because of the discoveries and the revelations that there is, I think Velikovsky's got some errors, and he didn't know about Sierra, and he put Sierra, blamed it on the comet. But no, the comet was, if there was an earlier one flood, it was 6,000. If the comet was associated with the flood, the wipeout of Atlantis, it was the earlier ones. So it wasn't 1700. So 1700 was Sierra, but he didn't know about Sierra yet. So he didn't have all the information yet. But he was working on what he knew. I won't go into the mythology. They didn't know Uranus existed, but before Saturn existed, there was only space. That suggests that we were floating in the void by ourselves until Saturn came along and became our star. Until it was not out of being our star, or whatever happened there, according to Velikovsky, that wound up in the separate orbits. But if that happened, then that kind of convergence of the planets has happened before, and the discharges between the ice caps. This is what I was saying about what caused the formation of the ice caps in the first place. For the millions of years they were there before these little warming periods we've been through, and the one we've ended, we'll never see an ice age again the way things are going with hot ice Earth. Unless the volcano happens again, and yeah, that can happen again. That might save our skins, it might kill us all, but the heat's going to kill us either way. That's interesting to watch. I'm not afraid. I've lost all fear. Well, physical harm, but it's a strange, strange world we live in, Master Jack, I closed with last night. So, this I'm going to put online for sure. I'd already done one to Dr. Nick Zentner at Central Washington for his excellent Geology of Washington series. I was watching his one on the exotic terrains, and it had some comments on how the Americans and the Canadian knowledge needs to integrate. as this is we all eventually need to integrate. Manifest destiny, we should just, especially here in the Northwest where we share a common history and a common heritage, and they don't know much about us and we don't know much about them, and we even our geographers even made a point of naming our ranges differently than the Americans classify them. Same with our ecoregions and ecozones, is a different system than the Americans use. But anyway, so I'm trying to help him, inform him about here, and hope he can tell us some interesting things about BC. I will be doing that in the Fraser Canyon. And also there's some, well, beautiful places there. I'm going to go high up and talk about the gold rush, and also about the mountains and the stars. And maybe I'll be playing my music, but maybe, I don't know, we'll see what I come up with high up there. It's a magical country, even though it's not as spectacular where as I'm from. But I think that whole Fraser Canyon from Boston Bar, Hell's Gate up, was ice-free, or under the ice. Like, why were the lake bottoms, at High Bar, going up to Fraser, from Pavilion, the benches at Pavilion are even higher than Keatley Creek. So all that was underneath. The ice cap was on the higher level of, like, where the Diamond S Ranch is on Pavilion Mountain. There's a higher level, like Jesmond, the Jesmond Plateau, the Gang Ranch Plateau. There's that lower valley must have existed underneath the glacier, and there must have been lakes underneath the glacier, or were there gaps in the glacier, even though there was still the coastal ice caps, the coastal ice massive. But the Fraser, I think, was ice-free in that area, although another lobe went down and over, melted down and went down out the Okanagan. Something about the Fraser Canyon doesn't make sense to me. And the lobe that's shown on Nick Sentner's map, he ends at the Whatcom County boundary instead of showing the lower mainland. Like, it's an American thing. They can't see the Canadian landscape. They can't talk about it. I don't know why that is. They've wanted it for years. You think Manifest Destiny, they'd be plotting it, looking at it. Maybe only the State Department is. Anyways, I'm sure the military's had a good long look at it, but that there's some odd things there. I pointed out some rills in Everson. Like there's little, like when water runs really fast, it leaves like little sand ripples in the sand. And how big they are. So what's the volume of water that came out of there? Was a sudden rush of water? Was it the Lahar, the debris flow out of Meager, or was it a sudden melt of the Lillooet ice cap, Lillooet Glacier? It would have been the Lillooet and the Samalo. Lillooet, yeah, pretty big. Coquihalla didn't have much of a glacier, would have been that, or was it that, or was it a sudden melt? What caused the sudden melt of the coastal ice caps and the Fraser ice caps? So the dating of the benchlands in the Fraser Canyon, the high benches, versus the plateau that's known to have been scraped by the ice. I don't know if there's drumlin formations. I missed finishing something I was saying to Dr. Zentner in my previous video about the Quesnel and Shuswap and Okanagan highlands. There's some debate as to whether they're part of the interior plateau or part of their respective Caribou Mountains and Monashees and Selkirks, right? Or in the yes, all Monashees all the way down from the Shuswap Highland. There's no connection to the Selkirks. And when did the Rocky Mountain Trench drain? When did all that empty? I don't think it was the ice-free corridor, but it was formed a long time ago by the ice. But this is his Lake Missoula waters. Came down out of the Kootenai Lobe, I think it's called. Which is the Rocky Mountain Trench, goes all the way to the Liard River, almost all the way to the Yukon, into the Selwyn Mountains, which is a continuation of the Rockies on the north side of the Liard all the way to the Brooks Range. That's wild country. I've never been through there. There are no roads in that country. Nothing in that country. Someday that may be the only country there is up there. But the scale of British Columbia is hard to reckon with to travel around and see it. So just even one small area like the Fraser Canyon, and then the Chilcotin basalts are still over in the Nicola country to the southeast. And there's things right around the volcanic horns at the top of we get up on top of Mount Stoyoma, just about east of where I'm going to be living, and I would see the Anderson River Group, which are these spectacular carved horns and sugar loaves of the northern end of the Cascade Mountains, which technically go all the way to Lytton Mountain at Lytton. and Stoyoma is part of them. But these are the last peaks, you know, other than rounded tops like Stoyoma or Lytton. Anyway, I could be able to see them, and I'll be able to see back over the little ranges, and I'll be able to see the blank in the landscape where the maw of the Fraser Canyon was carved through. But I think climatologically and evolutionarily, maybe there's a lot written on the glaciology and sedimentology of the Fraser Canyon. I would sure hope there is, because there's been so much work on the mineralogy. So as all the mining studies, you can learn a lot. But in terms of a narrative of it for the popular understanding, not just miners, the problem in British Columbia, I was going to comment this to Dr. Zentner before I go too, to everybody, that at one time, a BC base map and other government mapping services and information were free. Same with StatsCan. Now that's since the Tories and social credit and since the Liberals, that's all become pay as you go. You got to pay for access. You got to register. You can't just start generating maps and examining data. You have to pay for it now. Same with the detailed like ethnic data, socioeconomic voting data, all that stuff is data you have to pay for. So that's made information available only to those with money. So I believe in open source. And not consensus. Wikipedia is bullshit. Consensus never means consensus. It means vetoes by idiots. That's what it means. But I do believe in open source. And I've wondered about, you know, even though my music, of course, you know, you want to get something for what you do, right? But anybody who wants to cover me, I'd appreciate it. Just kick me back some money. Or if you do it on a proper recording, I'm a SOCAN guy, right? But for this, for clips of me when I'm talking about any of my science or history classics, any of the stuff to do with the electric cosmos or British Columbia politics, Canadian politics, the Wet'suwet'en thing, the Canyon Wars, Indian Wars here, ancient history things that I come up with, yeah, let's make me open source. I'm cool with that. Now, I haven't started a Patreon yet. I have to do that. I'm moving. I'm trying to get my life together. I just got off the phone with the government to arrange. You know, I got to get quotes on moving costs to get where I'm going by the end of the month. And, you know, once I get settled high up in the mountains, you know, the young professor has found his calling. So I hope you appreciate the stories that you hear from me and the perspectives I bring for you on things that we've known for a long time but never really known to look at properly. And also things about Canadian history that really, quite frankly, the rest of the world will find it really interesting, but they'll also find it they need to know the truth about this country, the nice Dominion. I would say that with great irony. My head's getting cold. I do have pneumonia. No, I won't gonna get pneumonia. I'm an old man, but I'm gonna be healthy again. I'm gonna be playing beautiful music and dancing in the mountains. And, you know, I have some young friends that I think are, you know, there's only so many of us that are angels, and we all have to find each other right now and do our best. You know, to work towards what to share all the information and the goodwill that we have for all, you know, to try and put together ideas and plans that will work, not just democratic reform, but technological ideas, you know, that I want to be able to say to the guys in the yellow vest movement, the Canadian ones, not the I'm going to stop calling them idiots. They're just guys that want to keep their jobs. The guys in the Canadian yellow vest. They're nothing like the French yellow vest yet. So I want to make them like the French yellow vests and realize that on their way to Ottawa, they should be stopping and do the on to Ottawa thing. You pick up the poor, pick up the elderly, pick up the natives, give everybody a ride to Ottawa. Yeah, the on to Ottawa trek from Vancouver, it got taken off the train by Gatling gun. Did you know that, people? At Hatsick, just east of where I went to high school in Mission, right? Hatsick, right? Yeah, the Gatling gun met them on the tracks, and all the guys on the train bound for Ottawa, they'd hijacked a train out of the Vancouver yards. They were headed for Ottawa. Well, military can't have that happen. So they were all sent to work camps, and some of them were sent to Desroches, which was a VD camp and stuff, right? Like, and where the Japanese were sent in the 40s was where the guys were sent for the work camps. I think Lemon Creek was a work camp, so for example. I don't know exactly. Some of them were anyway. The relief camps, you know. So that went down. So, but now you've got your big trucks. You know, you want to get rid of the gas tax. You want to build your goddamn pipeline. Well, you know, you can't build it on someone else's land, okay? And if you don't want to, want to deal with the constitutional legalities of the sovereign nature of the Wet'suwet'en Confederacy and the hereditary chiefs of the Gitxsan, and that Unistoten is unsurrendered just like the hereditary chieftaincies are, you know, and lots of the rest of BC is, and the Secwepemc territory is unsurrendered, and all of its unsurrendered territory. The Crown has no actual reason to be in British Columbia. British Columbia is technically a squat. People don't like to hear that. Oh, don't say bad things about our country. No, you got to realize that if they can do this to the natives and take away and override the rights of the natives, they can take away your rights. They can take away your trucks. You guys can learn new work, okay? I got new work for you. Okay, Canadian Yellow Vest, I'm speaking to you. I got new ideas for things you could work at. Same rigs. You had drillers? Oh, yeah, geothermal, tons of work. Do you know how much energy is down below us? Who needs to ship it anywhere else so we can use that energy for your kids to develop a high technology Canada and get us, even though we don't have a high population, you know, heat everybody, give everybody a home, a nice warm home, no more people sleeping on the street. And don't begrudge people who cares if they're junkies, who care, but if they're old or just injured. Like I went through work injuries, you know, and you wind up being poor and people treat you like it's your fault. Oh no, and then there's people that have problems they're born with them, like my cousin who we buried today, her family buried today. And she was deaf-mute. She put up with all kinds of things all her life. She got knocked by a car and screwed up by the lawyers and ICBC and everything, you know. People have reasons to need help, and that's why the universal basic income is food. So you Canadian Yellow Vest guys, you know, you shouldn't have jeered that Native woman in Regina. That was sickening, okay? That was sickening to see. You should have listened to her. What she had to say was, you know, if you guys want jobs, you know, you have to learn ways to do it. You have to ask for consent. You can't assume that natives can be walked over, that anybody can be walked over just so you can have a job and you don't care about anybody else. Well, the French Yellow Vests are not like you, brothers. They're not like you. They're not like you. They've been feeding the street people as they walk by. And, you know, elderly people have been with them in the crowds and getting flashbanged and beaten and maced, you know, in cold weather. Because they're hungry and their grandchildren are hungry, right? So you guys still have your big houses and your fancy trucks, but you think about all the kids who committed suicide in Thunder Bay as you drive through there. I'm saying this to you, Canadian Yellow Vests, that the Northern Ontario situation with the First Nations is what you should be going to Ottawa about, and bring some of them with you, and bring some elderly, and bring the street people you find along the way in Winnipeg, and bring them to Parliament Hill and take everybody there. The natives put 30,000 people there. Surely the Canadian Yellow Vest can put a lot more than that, and it can be more than just natives. It needs to be everybody together. I want sovereignty for the natives. I want sovereignty for British Columbia. I want Ottawa to butt out. Me, I'm a devolutionist. I think we need separate reconstitutions of each and every province and citizens initiative referendums and citizens assembly to decide what to do. And we do what the Icelanders did. When we debate the new constitution, no lawyers, no bankers or financial people, realtors, or politicians, realtors, should be allowed to write the new constitution and take part in the debates there too. The problem with the 1982 constitution by the current Prime Minister's father was he did it to try and appease Quebec's hatred of the British roots of Canada by trying to repatriate the Constitution so that we didn't have the Home Office to go, or the Privy Council, whatever, the law lords or whomever, certain committee of Britain to go to for amendments. You know, we still were subservient to Britain. So, but they didn't even want to sign it. But in the process, he created this. All he did was entrench the hack way, the corrupted way that the Parliament has been corrupted by the party system, and the first ministerships. You know, the premierships, as they call them in Wikipedia, the prime ministers and the premiers. And, you know, Charlottetown created the Council of the First Ministers. That was a change in the Constitution. Did we vote to create that, where all the premiers meet and decide the fate of the country without anybody else having any input other than their own advisors? And their advisors are all just yes men. And what all of the First Ministers are, like I could start going through the list, including the Prime Minister and every premier, what they got and who they did it for, what they got donated, what the payback was, bagmen in chief. Our entire system is built on corruption and patronage and pork barrel and patronage. It's disgusting. We are just an ex-colony, and we're still run as a colony. It's just that our owners are white, and also they didn't hold it just locally. They were perfectly willing to sell the rest of us out, And that's, I won't get into the partisanship that I easily can, but the reality of the equation in Canada is the falsity of what we have called a fair democracy has been ripped away. It's been ripped away. That we have a prime minister who's mansplaining to angry First Nations women who are standing up, and very justly, for their right and demanding that he speak logically, and he's just talking to them to like a PR spin doctor brat, spinning platitudes, saying, well, I think we'll have to talk about it in a long time. I welcome the partnership. I'm open to it. You're not open to it when you're sending in troops on. I mean, like the gall of the man and Horgan to go, well, that they have to obey the law, and then Wilkinson going, it's about the rule of law, he's saying to China. Well, it is. It is. Well, where's the rule of law when it comes to the First Nations? Why are all the laws built to put First Nations in jail? Yeah. So I'm told, even though I'm whiter than white, I get it. I totally get it, and many of us do. And we have since the 70s, ever since Chief Jan George's speech, and then through the 70s, we all, through Oka and other things before that, and the media were constantly trying to de-sell us on our support for the natives, even after Oka, when 90% of us were in support of a sovereign Mohawk state within Canada, which I think is an eminent solution there. I also think it's logical in the Gitxsan-Wet'suwet'en Confederacy and the other treated areas to have condominium governments, and in British Columbia, because there is no crown title, there's no reason for the province of British Columbia to claim title over all the province. That if somewhere like the Caribou wanted to make itself a canton where the white towns and the reserves all become a collective community, and it's a common locally ruled area, local shared sovereignties, a federation of sovereignties within the lands west of the Rockies and what are called the unsurrendered territories. I say the Assembly of Sovereign Nations, something like that. And be friendly to the states, and let them build a freeway to somewhere. They want to go to Alaska, let them. Alberta, give them Alberta. Fuck it, But Alberta, the thing about you guys that are being the roughnecks and want your jobs and damn everybody else and damn we want our pipelines, damn British Columbia, damn them hoopies and them enviros and them natives in the way of me making money. You don't even know how much you're being used by your employers that have got you locked in that one industry and not allowed you to learn about any other industry or even think about another industry in beneficial terms. And, you're always going on about Neil Young driving his diesel buses. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if Neil Young has an electric bus by now or got one on order. And are you driving electric trucks? You complain about the carbon tax? Well, I'll tell you what, one of the reasons people revolted in France was because there wasn't enough electrical outlets, and Macron would get them to all switch to diesel, and you up the diesel taxes. It wasn't just carbon tax he pulled. And he pulled away the wealth tax. He gave away more money to the rich. So people are saying, the Canadian Yellow Jackets, I'm talking to you, the guy I listened to in Bordeaux yesterday, I understand French. And he's saying, that the people sleeping in the rain when all the wealth is wrong. I'm basically summing up parallel to Vancouver. It's not normal. It's not right. And that's why the people are in the street in Bordeaux, and why they're willing to take bullets and rubber bullets and flashbangs in the face. And one guy said he was willing to die. Yeah, one young guy. And for the cause of liberty, justice, equality, and fraternity. So if you guys are ready to do that, you Canadian Yellow Jackets, if you're real men, and you really care about your kids and you want a great world for your future where you're not whipsawed by foreign prices, and where you use the energy and the resources in Canada to develop the Canadian economy for all Canadians, not for the foreigners who currently control the tar sands and much of our infrastructure, and yeah, it does involve working with our continental neighbors, and I don't know, I won't get into that, but I think you have to consider your own sovereignty and understand that what Trudeau has been doing, is fulfilling a deal with China that Harper signed to say any thing that gets in the way of a Chinese company making a profit, you have to use all means necessary. And that term in diplomacy has always meant military action. So that was China that was pulling the trigger on the Wet'suwet'en blockade the other day. Ultimately, it was China that did that. The same as it's China that is bolstering Macron, and the Macron-Chinese alliance in Africa is threatened by the French yellow vests. You know, as is, you know, the Syrian war it implies a French withdrawal from Syria if the yellow vests win, and once the Sixth Republic wins. And Macron has showed that he's contemplating bloodshed. But I've seen the CRS on the run, and they're kind of overwhelmed. What I see is people fighting back. I saw people in Bordeaux firing fireworks and flares into them. It won't be long before they start firing other things, and the full civil war is on. But it will be because Macron has killed the wrong person on the wrong day. There's a 13-year-old girl who lost her eye. She's not the first one. I think it's 10 dead now, I heard the guy say. Now, we are changed. He's a good guy. I like him. He said some things, you know, about as though the Canadian Yellow Vest movement was being slandered by the media, which they deserve to be. But the media I like having them on to talk about, because it helps them not report actually what's going on in France. And unfortunately, we are changed, buddy. He doesn't speak French, so he can't communicate with the crowd or understand what's going on. He's brave. I'll say that for him. He was saying, you know, l'opéra somewhere. He heard an explosion. He ran for it. He was the first camera on the scene. It was that bomb the other day. Who knows what that was, you know. So as the bombs keep on going off in France and the revolution keeps on escalating, the silence on the internet will be more and more and more. And if I look on YouTube to try and find something on, say, Wet'suwet'en and cancel out everything else but CBCC, there's nothing else. But even though I know that there's other coverage and other sites out there, you can't find them on Google. So I don't know. I have to find other ways to search for the information. But I can only handle so much information at a time, including all the geology and the electronic history and stuff. I need to bottle all my little different departments in my head. But like I said about Lobsang Rampa, you know, there's all these little drawers, but I get jumbled as to which drawer and which drawer. They're all interlinked for me. You know, memory is a giant tree. It's the world tree. It's dendrites in your mind, the ganglia in your mind, and all the neurons. Mine are all totally interconnected. So I'm the unprofessor. I know about everything and nothing about anything. A little bit about everything and nothing about anything. I see how things fit together. I'm a logical mind, maybe too logical. I don't need to be grim when I see the big grand things I see. And the dire forecast, it may sound like I'm making, I'm just seeing logical processes. And I've watched the logical processes of climate change, political decay, and the dissolution of the United States into what it is now. I've been watching it happen my whole life, and I saw it coming right from the start. So, you know, my line about Cassandra is that, you know, Apollo gave her the gift of prophecy that nobody would believe, and whatever. And yeah, it's true. You know, people don't believe you, but if that's the case, well, you might as well say it anyway. And let them call you names. They will anyway. They'll call you names anyway. So why don't you tell the truth about all you know? Why don't you tell the truth about all you know? That's what I say to all my friends, my young friends who are vlogging and starting to come out. My friend Corky. Well, that was an interesting lighting effect. Oh, I like that. I'm going to go back and do that again. There was a hit of light a certain way. I don't know. I'll have to go back and look at that. That was cool. Yeah, Corky's starting to do it, and I've encouraged certain other people to do it. I'll attribute certain vloggers again: Ryan Hadfield, Dr. Jackson Crawford, nomadic professor, history guy. I like Kings and Generals, although they're just graphics. But people, including We Are Changed and some of the other vloggers, I've seen so many vloggers that come up with history that doesn't get it. You know, like the thing about obsessing about Sumer and the Anunnaki, where there's so much other East Indian and Chinese and Nordic history and African and you know, South American and there's other things in the Maya and the Aztecs. The Maya and the Aztecs are recent, kids. You know, yeah, Quetzalcoatl, he's recent. You know, and he's not a comet. No, he's not a comet. He's some red-haired guy that came across from the Eastern Sea. It's amazing how they ignore those parts of the story. So anyway, that's one last thing I'll say. Go look up the Skeletons in the Closet video about the Blonde Maoris. Good night. Skirkin1, the Unprofessor, Big Mike Clevens signing off. Bye.